Trigger warning. This episode contains talk of death. You will hear the following sound at the beginning of the conversation and again at the end. Feel free to not listen to that part.
Morning.
Happy Lumpy for
Happy
me.
Lumpy for you. What an exciting day.
It's a bit weird. I felt really teary about it yesterday.
Yeah.
I feel better about it today. I'll probably feel teary about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's not even like I was sad that it all happened rather than, oh my God, I had cancer. But it's like, oh, I'm really sad that that happened.
Yeah.
And that happened at this time of
Well, it's
year.
tainted like Christmas, I guess. So yeah, just for context, like we're recording
Christmas
this episode.
Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. Christmas Day was when you found your lump. So it's like it must be a weird time of year for you because it must be like happy, sad,
constantly. But last year was an actual Grinch. I didn't want to do Christmas. I didn't want anything to do with it. Like the tree went up last minute. There were no other decorations. Christmas Day, we just got up and went straight to my parents, and I spent most of the day crying.
Yeah.
Whereas this year I feel just sad that it happened, but like really grateful for everything else that has come because of it.
We've come a long way.
It on my Instagram this morning. I was like,
I gave you a line.
I said I was grateful for you.
Yeah, you know.
Grateful for the podcast.
Everyone's grateful for me. No,
you're great. Not to fill your head, but I was just grateful for everything I learned about myself, I think.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you get many opportunities in your life to learn those things about you, like how resilient you can be, how hard you're willing to fight for yourself, like all the pain that the medicine gives you. And because pain is invisible, there's no scale, there's no way to see it. It's you have to fight to tell people what you need.
Yeah, definitely.
And I never would have fought like that before. I'd have a medical professional would have said, oh no, I don't think you need that. And I'd have been like, okay cool.
Yeah, you're like way more like strong-willed now. Like,
yeah,
you know what you need and you're going to get up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it happened in a weird way. Just wish it didn't happen at Christmas.
Yeah, it's
really
not.
Great.
I mean, it's never a good time to get cancer, but when it's like a time of year where you're like celebrating something, you don't want another thing that's like bringing it down.
Yeah. Anyway, how was your date?
Oh.
Oh no.
I didn't go on the date because he cancelled last minute. Yeah. But I feel like I'm not even surprised at this point. Like I've been cancelled on like so many times. Once this guy cancelled on me, like I was already on my way to the date and he cancelled on me like 20 minutes before we were supposed to meet.
No.
He was a pretentious asshole. So yeah, I didn't go on the date, which was really annoying. The bar is low at the moment. Like really all you've got to do is show up and like you've got points. Do you know what I mean? Like the bar is so low. Maybe buy me a coffee.
Yeah.
Would be that's bonus points for the coffee. Yeah.
You're top of the list.
Yeah. Guys, and don't come at me because obviously not all guys, but all the guys that I've had experience with, they just want to put in minimum effort and get maximum output. Like I went on one date with a guy and he arrived before me. Yeah, I turned up and he was already sat down. He already got himself a drink. And I walked over and he just went, bar's over there, if you want to get yourself a drink.
No.
And that's like the first thing he said to me. Like, no, like, hey, how are you? No, like hug. It was literally just bar's over there if you want to get yourself a drink.
Oh God.
And I was like, wow, okay, I will. And then he had the audacity to message me the next day and ask me to go to his house to watch a movie. Like, you want me to come over and sleep with you? You've not even bought me a drink.
Well, at least yesterday's guy just cancelled.
Yeah.
No follow-up, no.
And at least he cancelled with, like, time to spare, do you know what I mean? Like, I hadn't got ready or anything. It was, like, 7 o'clock in the morning when he cancelled. So, like, props to you for kind of cancelling with time to spare. Speaking of shit dates.
Yeah.
Tell you what is a shit date.
Yeah.
Chemotherapy at the day treatment unit.
Yeah,
Do you like what I did there?
Oh.
That was a smooth link.
I honestly, like, every time I think about chemotherapy, it's like this nightmare that I definitely know happened, but I really struggle to remember it, despite I know, like, it was fucking awful.
Oh, God. I feel like, you do just try and sort of, like, blank it out, because it was rough.
Yeah. So I had 8 rounds of dose-dense chemotherapy.
Yeah, I had the same. Yeah, dose-dense.
And we both had the same drugs, didn't we? EC and Paclitaxel.
Yeah.
So we'll give you a little bit of background on the meds. Obviously, we're not medical professionals. EC is also known as the Red Devil. It's one of the worst breast cancer chemotherapy drugs you can be given. It makes your pee turn red, which they failed to tell me on my first. Yeah, on my
I was
first
prepared
lesson.
for that, to be fair.
First lesson.
Lesson
of chemotherapy on my first treatment. So I went for a wee and then panicked and thought I was dying, which was obviously not great.
Yeah.
You're fitted, or you can be fitted with a PICC line.
Yeah.
I had a PICC line. Did you have
I
one?
had a PICC line.
So a PICC line is it's like a catheter almost, isn't it? Like it has a tube that goes up through one of the veins. It goes all the way up your shoulder, actually stops just before the opening of your heart.
Yeah.
It's really weird when they first put it in,
isn't it? I just had like a weird sensation in my heart. You're awake when they do it, and like the only bit I found that was painful was when they initially shoved the tube in.
A triangular ultrasound sits on your chest.
Yes, you're laying
and
down.
Then on a screen you can see your heart and your heart pumping. And
it was really interesting actually to watch the screen. Like it was a weird moment, but
the tube that has essentially gone up your vein appear in the ultrasound, and they position it just above before the vein enters into the heart, so that when they put the drugs through, it gets pumped straight into your heart, and your heart immediately pushes it out.
And it's because that's
bloodstream.
You have like obviously loads of blood going into your heart, because you don't have to have that put in. Like you can just have, they can just find a vein on the day and do it like a normal catheter. It like burns, and it basically affects like your small veins in your arms.
Can make your veins collapse.
Yeah, and because you've got a really small blood flow through like the little veins, it's much better to have the drug come through when there's like loads of blood.
It also
to stop it
means
from being so aggressive.
You don't have to be stabbed so many times.
Oh god, it really saves your veins. But they're really useful because obviously, you don't have to get stabbed every time you go in. You can also have bloods taken from it as well. So like you have to have your bloods done before every dose of chemotherapy, basically.
Yeah. So chemotherapy essentially decimates your white blood cells. You're poisoning your body to make yourself better.
It kills every fast-growing cell,
every
basically.
Fast-growing cell,
which includes white blood cells.
So there is a threshold, and it's a like bare minimum threshold that your bloods have to meet at least the day of chemotherapy for you to be safe enough to receive your next one.
I was so grateful I had my PICC lines, and I think that is generally what they give you, but not everyone like gets on with PICC lines. And if I don't know much about the port, to be honest, I just know that it's like quite popular if you do a lot of swimming, or I guess if you're like stage 4 cancer and you literally just have to be on chemo for like the rest of your life, it's obviously easier to have a port, because then you can it's easier to like do things with the port in.
PICC line was my friend. I was so keen to get it out at the end of chemotherapy, but then once it was out, I weirdly missed it. And I'd have nightmares as well about it just coming out of my arm and blood gushing everywhere, even though I knew that wasn't possible because it's held in with a needle that's got a little hook on it. So it hooks itself in.
That was horrible to get out.
It's not going anywhere. Unless...
They measure you up with the tube, like from your arm to your heart, so they know roughly how much tube to use. But the nurse told me, so when she put it in, like I actually felt it go like into my heart, and I was like, oh god, what was that? And she basically told me that like my insides are smaller than my outsides. So she like sort of measured it, and then when she put it in, like there was way excess tube essentially. So then I had like a really long bit of like tube poking out that I had to sort of like wrap around, and it was fine, but like it was very dangly.
So we both had EC first, didn't we? They give it to you in these giant isn't even a big enough word, syringes.
They have 2, don't you? Or was it 2 or 3?
Them.
2.
I had 2.
Yeah.
And they have to push them in really slowly, and a nurse quite literally sits there pushing the drug into you. It's
a
like
quick one though, isn't it? That was the benefit of the EC. It's like once the nurse is there administering the drug, it takes about half an hour, I'd say. And they're just sort of sat there like making small talk with you, like whilst they're just pushing this like horrendous drug into your arm.
Nothing, because I'll be dying.
They explain the side effects and stuff, and there's obviously a whole host of side effects. The worst one I think being like nausea, fatigue, and they give you loads of drugs. They give you anti-sickness drugs, but I think obviously you don't really know what to expect until you have it done. I was driving home, and you don't feel the effects immediately. It takes a good few hours.
EC, I think I worked out I had about 4 hours before I started to feel like something was wrong.
I was really like blasé about it. Like the first one I had, I remember driving in the car on the way home thinking like, I feel fine, like this is gonna be fine.
I can do this.
Yeah, and I like really remember specifically saying like, because I was never an ill person. Like I was very healthy before I had cancer, and I remember thinking like, oh, I'm not really a sicky person, so like maybe this just isn't gonna affect me.
Yeah.
And then it was literally like 2 hours later, it was like, boom, like came down like a ton of bricks, and I was like, oh.
Did you find the idea of chemotherapy just inherently terrifying from the moment you?
I think like you build up this idea of what chemotherapy is in your head from like movies and like I mean, I've watched My Sister's Keeper, and whilst it is sort of like that, it's not. It's really, really different.
I cried before every chemotherapy, so every morning I'd get up, would cry, and I would say, I don't want to do this, and that was every 8 sessions I did that, except for the last one where I was at my mum and dad's and I just went silent. I didn't speak for about 2 hours before the last one because it felt like so much was riding on it. And even then,
it was. I
remember standing outside the door and being like, I can't do this. I can't walk in there. Not even though I know this is the last time. I can't do this. It's too scary.
And it was just a horrible place to be. And I think like because we both had chemo during COVID, you weren't allowed to take anybody with you. No. You would just sit there by yourself. And the EC wasn't so bad because it did only take half an hour. But when you get to the paclitaxel, it was
4 hours.
4 to 5 hours.
It's a 4-hour drip itself. You have to have heavy duty antihistamines. Because paclitaxel, you can have an allergic reaction.
So you have to be like really closely monitored.
So they give you the antihistamines just before you have the paclitaxel, in effect to buy them time to react to you. I thankfully never reacted, but I did have a friend who had paclitaxel and she did.
I didn't react either.
Were you the youngest person on the day treatment unit at the time?
Yep. I think that's probably what I found like really hard about it as well, is that you can't relate to anybody else in there. Everybody in there was at least 60.
Yeah.
But most of them were, I think, like 70, 80 plus. You're young, aren't you? And it was like, state the obvious. Like, yeah, I know. Can we just get on with this, please? Like, I don't want to hear it. Like,
it's awful.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the being at the treatment unit itself, as much as it's a horrible place to be, I think was the easiest part, because you'd come home and you'd have that couple of hours where you felt okay, and then all of a sudden, for me, I just hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
The nausea for me was worse on the paclitaxel. I was physically being sick on paclitaxel.
Oh, I was opposite. I was physically being sick on EC. Paclitaxel wasn't that bad for me.
I mean, should we talk about when I thought I was going to die?
Yeah.
I was on EC when I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
And this might get quite heavy. Apologies, but we said we'd be honest. So it was my first round of EC, which is arguably the worst. The first round of your chemo will always be the worst, because you're going from extremely healthy to putting your body on the brink of what it can cope with. So I caught an infection that week, but this one in particular was really nasty. The pain from the filgrastim was unbearable. I could feel every bone in my body. It felt like my skull was crushing my brain. I was sat in front of the radiator and I rang my dad and I just cried down the phone that I said, I can feel my skull. I can feel everything. And that was all I said to him before he hung up, and 20 minutes later he was here.
Yeah.
And I have never felt, I'm shaking as I speak about it, I never felt so weak, and it felt like I could physically feel my body shutting down.
Yeah.
It genuinely felt like this is it, and that's not an exaggeration. My dad walked in with my mum in tow, and I was still lying on the floor, phone in hand, in front of that radiator, hadn't moved.
Wow.
And they just picked me up and I just cried, and they got me on the sofa and they got me cozy. And then they took my temperature. And when you're on chemotherapy, they say a temperature of 37.5 is considered life-threatening. My temperature at the time was 39. I didn't feel hot. I felt cold. I was wearing pajamas, a jumper, a dressing gown, and I was under a duvet.
Yeah.
I felt freezing cold, but I was sweating like nothing on earth. And I was in effect drifting in and out of consciousness, essentially. It wasn't sleep. And my mum and my dad were asking to call the hospital to take me in. My temperature was high, and I was saying no. And in my head, and I've only voiced this to a lot of the people around me fairly recently.
Yeah, you've told me this story, but
I was lying on my sofa where we're sat now. My dad was sat at one end, my mum was sat at the other, and I just remember thinking, if I let you take me to hospital, I have to die on my own.
Yeah.
But if I stay here, I can die with you.
Yeah.
And I never told them
that's what you were thinking.
I don't know if I've told them that. So I'm sorry, Mum and Dad, if I haven't, and that's the first time you're hearing it. And I was just, the whole time I was thinking, just try and stay awake. Just try and stay alive until Shane gets home from work. And it was hours of in and out of not knowing really what was happening around me. That I just thought, if I close my eyes, that's it. I'm not waking up ever again. And Shane came home from work, and I gave him the biggest hug of my life. And then I just went to sleep. And I went to sleep thinking, this is it. I'm not waking back up. I did wake up 16 hours later the next day, and I just woke up and looked at him and went, am I alive? That was it. It was almost like
it didn't happen.
Yeah. And I find it really scary now, the speed at which I just went, okay, well, this is it. I'm going to die. I can't stop this. There's nothing I can do.
It's a really crazy thing to have to deal with in your mind. I think we've spoken about death a lot, and I think when you get diagnosed with cancer and other things, obviously death is kind of one of the first things that you think about. But I've never had to experience thinking about death in the immediate, this is it now.
I really don't want to die. I was so grateful that I woke up.
Yeah.
That gave me this huge appreciation for life and this huge appreciation for the people around me.
That's a dark place to be, though, to be thinking, I can't tell anyone else that I think I'm gonna die. To have to do that on your own, I think is really, really crazy.
Off the back of it, I then spent an awful lot of the rest of my chemotherapy sorting out if in the next 8 weeks I was to die, everything was in order.
But do you think, looking back now, do you think you would, if that was to happen again, would you tell them that that's what was going through your mind?
I still don't think so, no.
Do you not?
Because all they want to do is fix it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to make you better.
Yeah.
And there's nothing they can do. I think if I was in that situation again and there's no COVID restrictions, they can come to the hospital with me. I'd go to the hospital, 100%.
I mean, that is the advice of the nurses, guys.
The issue, I think the overriding factor for me was I don't want to die alone.
Yeah.
If this is how I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Should we take a break? Because that was a heavy story, and I feel like you're
slightly going to cry.
Yes. So let's take 5 minutes and,
You want to talk about your experience with these?
Yeah.
Might be a bit brighter.
Mine's not quite as traumatic as that. So yeah, if your temperature is above 38, they're you must call triage, and then they essentially will tell you to go to A&E. But obviously,
they give you a
little. Yes. I think the worst for me was the sickness. So I was actually physically sick on EC. They give you anti-sickness drugs to take, which I took religiously. It doesn't always work.
No.
The first day I remember coming home thinking, this is gonna be a doddle, I feel fine. And then I remember being upstairs with my mum and my dad. We were watching a Disney movie, and I was just halfway through the movie, when you're trying to fight down the sickness, you're no, I don't feel sick, and then I was getting hot, and then when your mouth goes really salivary, you just know just know you're about to be sick. And then eventually I just had to be I'm gonna vomit. I just run to the toilet, just threw up everywhere. It really came out, and I hate being sick.
Same.
I hate the feeling of being sick. And I remember being sick, and then my mum obviously came in to pat me on the back and hold my hair back. It was the first cycle, so I still had my hair at that point. And I just remember getting up and just crying and just being this isn't fair. I don't want to do this. And I think they obviously felt really helpless, because what are you supposed, there's nothing you can do. And I just had to go to bed, and they give you, I don't know if they gave you these, they probably did, but sleeping pills.
Yeah.
So essentially it's really difficult to sleep on chemotherapy. I think it's difficult to sleep when you're feeling ill anyway.
Yeah.
But when you're feeling so awful and you think it would be easy because you're so fatigued, the depression, the anxiety just like keeps you awake. Like I really, really struggled to sleep the first probably like 6 months. I barely got sleep. So they give you sleeping pills for 7 days. Obviously you have 2 weeks of each cycle. So I didn't take my sleeping pills because I was scared to take them. I've never taken sleeping pills before.
No.
And I was really scared, like really irrationally scared that like I would take one and just not wake up. And in my mind, I was just like, I'm going to take these sleeping pills. And then what happens if I like, I'm sick in the night and then I'm choking on my own sick and I'm not waking up because I'm on sleeping pills? But like that's not how they work.
No,
like you would still wake. I was really like overplaying this in my head, like if I take these sleeping pills I'm gonna die. So I didn't take them for like 2 cycles, and then I spoke to my oncologist and she was like, you need to take, like sleep's really important, like your body's going for an awful lot and like you need to be sleeping rather than being worried about any potential side effects of the sleeping pills, because I was worried about getting addicted to these pills as well. And she was like, you don't need to worry about that. It's more important that you get enough sleep.
Yeah.
So I started taking these sleeping pills and they were magical. Honest to God, I loved them. They were life-changing. I was like, as if I haven't been taking these from the beginning. I've been struggling on trying to sleep.
But you do become scared of everything.
Everything is a risk.
You know your body and then you don't know your body.
Exactly. So many things are happening and like you get so many weird sensations, and I was always so scared, and I still am now, to a point where like any weird sensation in my body, my mind immediately went to the cancer spread, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Any weird sensation.
I've been getting dizzy the last few days because I've got a very small ear infection. First thing I said to Shane was, I'm not Googling it because I definitely have a brain tumour.
Yeah. I messaged my oncologist last week because I was getting like I was getting headaches, I was feeling dizzy, and I think like I feel better now. I feel like I was just coming down with something. It's that time of year where people do just get ill. But every time I'm ill, I'm immediately like, well, I've got cancer again, haven't I?
Hi.
Yeah.
Dying.
Basically.
Might have cancer again. Symptoms are headaches.
But she was so nice and she replied, and she reassured me. Anyway, it was fine. I feel fine now.
I'm glad you don't have cancer.
Yeah. For me, EC was just the sickness. The thing with dose dense is because you have it every 2 weeks, you never fully feel well. So when you have treatment every 3 weeks, you feel shit for the first week, and then you start feeling a little bit better, like sort of day by day during the second week, and then the third week you feel obviously not your best, but like where you can like sort of live your daily life and you can do things.
In each cycle for me, day 14, so the day before I was to do my next dose, I felt borderline human.
Yeah.
That was the day I could get up, I could shower myself.
Yeah.
I could feed myself.
Yeah.
I could function and perform basic human survival. Whereas the rest of the time, I couldn't stand up in the shower. I had to wait quite often for Shane to come home.
Yeah.
And
I didn't even attempt to wash. I definitely went for like a week at a time without showering, which is grim, but like you just physically, you're so tired, and the depression obviously doesn't help. So like you're literally just like, you can't perform normal daily functions like showering, which seems like such a simple task, but
after I'd lost my hair.
But yeah, so I think like when you're having dose dense, the day, like you said, the day you feeling normal is day 14 when you're immediately going in for the next cycle of treatment. So you don't get that extra week of like feeling normal and well enough. You go up a little bit and then you go down, and then the next time you get you go up a little bit, but you never reach like the same level as the cycle before.
Did you have the same district nurse?
No.
Did you not? Oh, so I did.
Oh,
so
see, that's what I would have liked.
That was the only continuity of care.
I didn't even get that.
My nurse, shout out to Tracy, who
I did have Tracy. She was lovely. Yeah.
I had her fairly consistently. So we reached a point where she was turning up and she was saying, today's not a good day. You look worse than you have on other rounds. And I actually found that really helpful, because sometimes I was convincing myself, oh, well, I'm nearly at day 14. I must be feeling better, and almost in denial about the fact that sometimes I didn't.
No. It wasn't always consistent.
Yeah.
Like just, you're getting the same drug, so you think you'd feel exactly the same every time, but you don't. There were definitely times where like my nephew had a football game, and like I actually went was well enough to actually go up and stand and watch his football game. I'd sit on the floor and watch the game. I couldn't really stand. So I remember my sister being like, "Oh, I'm really surprised to see you here," and I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised to be here, but like weirdly, I just feel okay today." But then the next day will be a different story, and I'd be in bed all day.
But you crave normality so much, and not even normality in going out with your friends and sitting and chatting, just even sometimes just being able to watch something on the TV. Like my attention was shot, I was falling asleep. I craved just being able to get up and cook dinner. Like I used to do all of our cooking. I'd feed us every night. I love feeding my family, and all of that stopped.
You don't want to like miss out on these like little life events, do you? And like I went to my niece's birthday party, which I probably shouldn't have done because there was a lot of like kids around, and they sort of tell you like, because of COVID as well, like you need to be isolating, like you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and it's like, fuck you, man. I want to go to my niece's birthday party. Like,
eat birthday cake.
Good God, they really drilled it into me about certain foods that you can or can't eat. So like you're not allowed to go out for dinner. A, because you're trying to isolate, but B, because you have to make sure all of your food is really, really cooked. So you weren't allowed to takeaways, you weren't allowed to go out for dinner. Yeah, you weren't allowed to have, like, if you wanted a steak, you couldn't have it rare or medium. You had to have everything everything had to be proper cooked. No soft cheeses.
Which really hurt me because I love
brie.
Did it?
Yeah.
After my last round of chemotherapy, I was genuinely counting down until I could eat brie. The day after that 2 weeks was done, I was like, right, I'm having bacon and brie sandwich. In fact, I'm having 4 of them. And I ate so much I was then sick. But I didn't regret it, and I still don't regret it.
No. No, because you're literally just craving all these things that they tell you you're not allowed to have, and it's like,
did you lose your sense of taste at all?
No, so I have heard of people that did, but I didn't lose my sense of taste, but I definitely went off food. So like my diet whilst I was on chemo was beige, very beige. Like a lot of the time all I wanted to eat was like fish fingers and chips, or like chicken nuggets, obviously chickenless chicken nuggets, or fishless fish fingers for me, because I am vegan. I don't know if I told you that I'm vegan. So my appetite was very, very beige because I just couldn't. My mum, bless her, would be like doing the weekly shopping list, and she'd be like, "So what do you fancy to eat this week?" I was thinking of making like really nice like creamy mushroom pasta, and I'd be like, ugh. Like I just couldn't stomach the thought of like certain foods. And so bless her, like most days she'd literally just be cooking me like fish fingers and chips. But then in the week, like the couple of days leading up to like your next cycle, when you do feel a bit better, I was like trying to cram in all of the good stuff. I remember thinking like, we've got to make this recipe, Mum, because it's got loads of like vegetables in, and I need to get my like dose of vegetables in before I know I'm just gonna be living off chips again. Like, it was awful.
While I was on EC, I lost my sense of taste.
Did you?
I was okay on Paclitaxel, but EC, and I discovered it in the most horrendous way. I had breakfast fine that morning. Didn't taste it. I made us pulled pork wraps for dinner, which are one of our favourite dinners, and I couldn't taste a thing.
Oh no.
But the food without taste is never an experience anyone should have, because it felt so disgusting in my mouth. I couldn't swallow it, and I forced myself to swallow it. I barely made it to the bathroom before my body went, not doing that, and it came back up. Don't drink cups of tea when you can't taste them. Teas, when you don't taste them, feel thick.
Interesting.
I can't explain it. But I didn't drink a cup of tea for about 6 weeks, I think it was. Mum was bringing me ginger tea. I hate ginger tea.
See, I
was drinking it.
I drank ginger tea. Like, well, they sort of like recommended ginger tea because obviously it's supposed to really help with like settling your stomach and sickness and stuff. So I was like, okay, great, ginger tea it is. I hated it.
Horrible.
Hated it.
Next time, lose your sense of taste. It really helps.
I don't want to lose my sense of taste. That sounded awful.
It was awful. I remember they told me to try eating like lemon sherbets, mint humbugs, that kind of stuff.
To like suck on things.
So Lisa and Stacey, who were my cheerleader team the whole way through, sent me Costco bags, like huge bags of lemon sherbets, and they're still in the cupboard. We haven't even got through them all, and I couldn't taste them because I could feel the sherbet on my tongue. It was like I could convince myself that I could taste it because there was a change in texture, which was really helpful. So top tip for anyone who ever loses their sense of taste.
Suck on some lemon sherbet.
I've got tons if you need some.
Should we talk about Paclitaxel a little bit in a bit more detail? So after we had 4 cycles of EC, we both went on to Paclitaxel. And I don't know how yours went, but I then had 4 cycles of Paclitaxel because because I know some people that have like smaller doses of paclitaxel once a week for like 10 or 12 weeks or something. Whereas like, I think we both had the same, like much higher dose for every 2 weeks. And do you know what? Well, my oncologist was like, you have EC first because it's the worst, and then you have paclitaxel and you feel a little bit better. See, mine, I preferred EC because I got to know the side effects. Like, I understood sort of like the rhythm of EC, when I was going to feel bad, like when I might start to feel a little bit better again. Whereas paclitaxel for me was all over the place. I couldn't handle it. I had so much weird pains, and then you get the tingling, the pins and needles in your like hands and feet, and you lose like sensations in like the tips of your fingers and your toes. I can't remember what that's called, but neuropathy. So I had a little bit of neuropathy as well. And I remember during paclitaxel, I actually had to go to A&E essentially because I was having like chest pains. I again convinced myself it was because the cancer had spread to my bones, and so they didn't tell me that the filgrastim, which is what you inject yourself with to increase your white blood cells, we'll go on to that in a little bit, they didn't tell me that causes bone pain. But during the whole of EC, I didn't get that. It was fine. But then as soon as I started paclitaxel, I was getting these horrific bone pains.
Paclitaxel is also well known for its bone pain, which is why it was so worse.
And it was just horrendous. And I had this pain that went from like my back all the way around my ribs, and I was like, the cancer spread to my bones, like this is horrific. And I was panicking myself so much that I was getting like chest pains. So I called the doctors, and they were like, we're sending you to basically A&E, you need an x-ray and all this and that. And that was a horrible experience because it's the middle of COVID and you're sat in the A&E waiting room with all of these people that are coughing, and I was literally just sat in the corner like, everybody stay away from me.
I've already got cancer. I don't need more cancer.
Yeah. Make sure you tell them what you're going through, and there are rooms available, like empty rooms that you can sit in away from the crowds. I didn't learn this until after I'd already done it, that you can like demand essentially to be put in a different room to wait and not with everybody else, because your immune system is so low and like it's so dangerous if you do catch anything that you don't want to be in this room. And I just sort of suffered just anxiously in the corner, like everybody keep their germs away from me. And I didn't realise that like hospitals did have like empty rooms that you could go and sit in. So I just sort of sat there saying nothing until my name was called. Like honestly, I was there for 5-6 hours. Everything was fine. It turned out it was just the filgrastim, but I just worked myself up so much that I just needed that reassurance. I was having a panic attack, and they just sent me away from the hospital like, here's some paracetamol, and I was like, seriously, I'm in so much pain, you've given me paracetamol. So I found paclitaxel really hard mentally because I just couldn't work out what was going on with my body, and every pain I thought was like the end of my life.
I found it easier in the 2-week cycle. The first week I felt awful, but after about 10 days I then felt genuinely normal. I had all the energy levels. I was up doing the food shop again. I was like a normal human being. It was exhausting, don't get me wrong, but I could do it. The bone pains from the paclitaxel and the filgrastim, I ended up on full-time codeine, and the codeine wasn't even enough, and I ended up begging them to let me stop the filgrastim, and they said there is a chance that if you stop the filgrastim you will not be ready each week for dose dense, so we might have to push out each round. And to be honest, I just told them I didn't care at that point. I needed not to be living in pain in the way I was, and I made a really conscious effort then to eat really healthy, to make sure I was resting so that I was ready. And I think there was only one round of paclitaxel where my bloods weren't ready when they were taken. Thankfully it fell over a bank holiday weekend, so they were taken earlier than a day or two earlier than they normally would have been because the district nurses weren't
so my bloods were always taken on a Friday, and I didn't have paclitaxel until Monday. So then obviously like if they're low on the Friday when they take the bloods, you've had the weekend for them to go back up again. So they always redo your bloods. If they're not good enough, they'll redo them there and then, won't they, to see if it's gone up.
I had my bloods taken on a Thursday and they were so low that I actually got a phone call from the hospital saying,
you can't come in.
You can come in, but we don't think you're going to be healthy enough. And so they retook my bloods, and then I had to nervously wait, and they came back and they said that my bloods just met the threshold. As in, like, if they had taken my bloods 6 hours before,
you wouldn't have met the threshold.
I wouldn't have met the threshold. So I was really pleased. But then what happened because of that is, because I'd had to take my bloods and I'd had to wait for them, it was then too late in the day to actually be given the Paclitaxel because it was 4 hours. There was also a huge mix-up with my chemotherapy. So for the Churchill, the chemotherapy is made in Cowley.
Yeah, and it gets cycled over.
My chemotherapy for that day wasn't actually sent over in the morning. So they'd realised that while they were taking my blood, and they'd been chasing it up in the hope that they could get it by the time my bloods had come back. And then they hadn't. So I did have to go back in the following day.
Did you?
But I was in the chair, 8 a.m, hooked up, out of there by midday.
See, I had a very similar experience. Like, my bloods were fine. The oncologist or whoever it was hadn't prescribed my drug.
Oh no.
So I got there and they'd hooked me up. I'd already had the initial drip of the antihistamine, and then you have to like have the Paclitaxel fairly quick after that. And I think as they were doing that, they'd realised that they didn't have the drug for me, and then they prescribed it there and then like you said, it has to be like couriered over to the Churchill. So I think I spent like 9 hours in the hospital that day.
Yeah, it was like all day.
Yeah, but I was like, I'm not coming back. Like, I'm here, I'm ready for it. You're not pushing back my chemotherapy. So I was determined to have chemotherapy, like as planned, as scheduled. I didn't want anything messing it up.
Yeah.
And so she sort of gave me the option, and I think she was hoping that I was going to say like, oh, I'll go home and come back, because it was late at this point. And Paclitaxel, it is a 4-hour drip. She was saying to me like, so like, we're going to get it as quickly as possible, but like, you know, do you want to go home and come back tomorrow? And I was like, no. There's not a chance I'm going home and coming back. Like, you're giving me this drug today. To be honest, like, a day wouldn't have made a difference. But when you're in it,
it does.
Every second makes a difference.
I was so deflated when they sent me home.
Yeah, today's chemo day. I'm ready. I'm pumped. I'm pumped for chemo day. And then you get there and they tell you got to go home, and you're like, no.
We had a calendar, and every day I was having chemo was circled, and I was crossing off every day.
Yeah, you count down, don't you? Yeah.
That day that they sent me home to come back the next day, all I could think was, no, because that's going to push everything back.
Yeah.
I had this complete fear that I can't do this any longer. I can't do this for another 48 hours, even though the majority of that 48 hours would have been me still at home doing nothing, feeling okay-ish. I knew what the end date was. I knew it.
This is when it's finishing. So this is when it's going to finish.
Yeah.
I don't care about your tests.
Yeah.
I don't care if my blood's not good enough. Fucking inject me with that shit. Get it all up in my body. Get it working.
Do you find the side effects in general on Paclitaxel a lot worse?
So it's difficult, like, no, because there was no sickness for me with Paclitaxel. There was no nausea. It was just the pain, the achiness, the pain, the tiredness. But because I didn't understand what the pain was, mentally I found it tougher. But looking back, like, side effect wise, no, EC was worse, definitely.
I agree. EC was worse physically, side effect way, Paclitaxel worse mentally. And also I think mentally because so I broke it down. I was EC for this long, Paclitaxel for this long. There was a midway point.
Yeah.
And I think at the midway point I was like, yes, we're halfway through this. I can do this.
I was so excited to change drugs.
But then also that realization that everything was then about to change. It was the middle of my first cycle on Paclitaxel that I rang the hospital and went, I need therapy. I need therapy now.
Yeah.
I don't have time to go through the process for talking space or anything. I need therapy now.
Yeah.
And Catherine, very lovely nurse who picked up the phone, was like, it's fine, we'll get you in with Macmillan.
Yeah.
And we can have you talking to someone by the end of the week. I
was
like, okay, that's all I need. I need to talk to someone because I was crying all the time. I cry all the time anyway. My eyes were just leaking. I couldn't stop. And sometimes I was bawling my eyes out. Other times I was just crying. And it's lonely. I mean, you had your parents,
really lonely.
Must have been.
I'm so grateful that I lived with my parents when this happened, but it was still lonely because you couldn't have like I had sort of friends come and I used to have to sit in the garden with them because obviously it was safer to be outside in terms of like catching anything. Yeah, the whole thing was just really lonely and just, it was just bad. Yeah, it was not a fun, it was not a fun place to be. And I didn't start therapy until after chemotherapy. So they called me and basically asked me how I was doing. And classic me back then, I was just like, I'm fine, yeah, I'm fine, I feel fine.
Oh, I burst into tears.
Did you? I burst into tears like eventually. But as soon as I answered the phone, they were like, so how are you doing? And I was like, yeah, I'm all right, yeah. But then they started like digging a bit deeper. And then by the end of the phone call, I was sobbing and they were like, we're going to recommend you for therapy. And I was like, yeah, okay. So yeah, I started having therapy with Macmillan and I had 10 sessions and then I had booster sessions because obviously like my treatment went on longer because I had to have 3 surgeries. So they were a bit like, okay, like this was unexpected. Like we'll get you in for some more, but they can only offer you so much because it's the NHS and there's hundreds of people that need therapy. But I was very grateful for that service. And I think like another tip that I would give anyone going through it is like, there's actually so many services for you that you're not really told about. Like your oncologists and your surgeons, they're not going to tell you every single detail, so like you do have to ask for things, but like you're within your right to ask for therapy, you're within your right to ask for a private room, you're within your right to like ask to be referred to a different consultant, you're within your right to have a second opinion, you're within your right to get re-referred to a different hospital. Like you know, you just have to, I think the biggest thing I learned is like you have to massively advocate for yourself, because they're not just going to hand you these things on a plate, but there's actually so many things open for you.
I think one of the things I would heavily suggest doing as well, which is what I did, is I certainly found the day I was diagnosed, I came home with all of this information and it was too overwhelming to read.
I didn't read any of it.
Stacey, who I will forever be grateful, sat down and read it. She just knew which bits of information I needed. There were times when I would be talking to Lisa and Stace and they'd go off and they'd research the services that were available to me and they'd send me the links of, okay, you could get therapy through Maggie's or therapy through these people, or there's this group here. And don't be scared to say to a friend, please can you be in charge of finding out what might be useful to me, because you're too busy being poorly. So I would definitely say, as well as advocating for yourself, asking someone that you trust and that is resourceful, I guess, to do the research for you.
Should we talk a little bit about what we mean when we talk about like filgrastim and those injections? Therapy that we had, it doesn't target cancer cells. Like it can't go in and be like, that's a cancer cell.
It just kills any quick growing cells.
Exactly.
So that is your hair. And that's all of your hair. Your nails. The skin on the inside of your mouth. But anything that essentially is in your body and is designed to grow quickly, replenish itself, replace itself, it's attacking.
And that includes
care if it's cancer or not.
That includes healthy cells. So that's why your immune system gets shot to shit, because it's killing your white blood cells as well. Your immune system is so low, which is why it's so dangerous if you get an infection of any kind. To help your immune system boost, you get given these injections called filgrastim. Is that right? Filgrastim.
Something like that. Your filgrastim lives in your fridge.
See, I wasn't told. I knew I was getting filgrastim, but I thought it would go through the PICC line. Like no one really described to me like how you had to do it. And I went for my first cycle and the pharmacist comes around every cycle and they give you like your drugs and they give you the filgrastim. And you have to keep it in the fridge.
So it's an injection you inject yourself into your tummy
yourself.
Fat. And it comes with, it's not the kind of injection you would get at the doctors when you get your flu jab or something. It's in this big self mechanism thing with the spring so that you can click it, give it to yourself, and the needle goes back inside so that everybody remains safe. But it's hefty and it's terrifying. And when you're very weak, the mechanism is very hard.
It's actually really, really difficult.
And you have to do it 7
days,
I was definitely too weak to do it. There were times when Shane would have to do it and Alice would be holding my hand and saying, it's going to be okay. It's okay. It's just one injection. which was great. And I mean, she had absolutely no idea that I was more scared of what was coming because of it than the actual injection.
I've never been scared of needles. I've been like poked and prodded so many times, and I don't really bat an eyelid, but it's so different when you've got to do it yourself, and it is a mind over matter thing, because once you've done it, you're like, oh, that was fine.
Yeah.
But the build up to it and the fact that you've got to do it to yourself, it's such an alien concept, having to stab yourself. And like, people who are like diabetic, like honestly, so much respect for you guys, because I don't know how, because you don't get used to it. No. Like I didn't anyway. By the end of it, I stabbed myself so many times, but every single time was such a struggle. And I remember like getting it out the fridge. You have to get it out the fridge half an hour before you put it in, so it warms up to room temperature, because otherwise it's painful when it's too cold. So yeah, you're there and you've pinched a bit of your fat, and you're there and you're just holding it onto your skin, and you're literally just like trying so hard to push the thing down. And there are days where I'd be like, okay, done. But most of the time,
was easy.
Yeah, well, the district nurse helped me the first time. She was like, "Oh, has anyone like described how to do it?" And I was like,
"None of that.
No,
I just went for
it." So she was so lovely, and so I saw her on the Friday, obviously, and she took my blood, and then she came back on the Saturday to show me how to do the injection.
That's lovely.
And so she obviously helped me the first time. She sort of guided my hands, and she like helped me push it down, and I was like, "Oh, that was really easy." Then without her help, it isn't easy. It's not that hard to get in. It's a small needle. It goes into your skin. It really isn't difficult, but your mind is telling you not to do it, so you're like resisting the push. And so sometimes I'm like, well, it's not going in, why is it not going in? And it's like, because I'm not actually pushing it. Feel like I am, but I'm just resisting it.
And the reason it causes bone aches is because every injection essentially promotes your bone marrow to reproduce white blood cells, and it takes a couple of days for your bone marrow to then be back up to speed to doing it. So every day of our lives, our bones are doing this, and we have no pain from it. We're back up to normal now, no pain. Just pain from other things. So what happens is the build up is promoting your marrow to work so hard to make you better. That's what it reaches a peak around day 4-5. And that's then what causes the pain.
Because you're basically forcing your bone marrow to do this. So your bones are just in pain. I was never told it was going to be painful, and then they sort of tell you like it's usually like the bigger bones really that is painful. But I felt it from the tippy top of my skull to the tippy bottoms of my toes.
Same, but my thighs and my hips were the worst.
It was my hips were bad, but it was my like ribs for me as well were really bad for some reason. It was so random.
It made my skin go really sensitive.
Really?
You know when you've got the flu and it hurts to touch like that? I remember there was one day in particular on Bone Day, as we started to refer to it in my
family,
Day. Where it was around the time I was also losing my hair, so I was horrendously emotional. And I was sat upstairs and I'd had a shower and I was sat on my bed naked, just crying. And Shane came up to hug me, to comfort me, and all I did was scream in pain. And I screamed, "Please don't ever touch me again," which is a horrible thing to say to someone. Even the tears coming down my face were painful, and I was sat there leaning forward so that the tears could just drip straight out of my eyes. Day to day, I'm never aware of your skeleton. Right? Like, you know you've got a skeleton, you know you've got bones, you know it's doing all this stuff. But suddenly I was like, I have a skeleton.
At the end of chemotherapy, I thought it was going to be this like magical moment. So like you're literally free and you skip off into the world, and obviously you see in the movies
the bell,
the people ringing the bell, and some hospitals have no bell. I was bitterly disappointed. And I was literally just like, are you joking me? Because you see all these people ringing bells, and you see it in the movie where it's like, oh my god, I finished chemo, let me ring the bell, and everyone's like, everyone, you're walking out, everyone's like in a line, like clapping you as you leave the hospital, like woo, woo, woo. None of that. So I'm sure that maybe happens in some hospitals, not in ours. There's no bell, so literally you have your final dose, and then you're literally just like, okay, I'm free to go. And they're like, yeah, you can go now, like hopefully, and then they're sort of like, hopefully we won't ever see you again, like obviously in a nice way, like we don't want to see you back on the day treatment ward.
I never want to.
And I literally was just like walking out really slowly, like, is this actually it? Like, am I being pranked right now? Like, are you expecting this big fanfare, and then it just doesn't come?
I know.
And I was just like, that was so anticlimactic. And then I sort of got out, and my parents were like, oh my god, yeah, you did it. And I was like, I did, but I don't feel this sense of like, accomplishment or relief that I expected to feel. Like I just didn't really feel anything.
So my last round, I think I had really built up that this is it, this is the last one, we're done after that, to the point that even going into it was a dance like harder. My mum and my dad dropped me off that time, and my dad was leaning out the car like, go get him, girl, which is amazing. And I very fondly think of that, even though I think at the time I was just staring at him very deadpan. And I remember coming back out and getting back in the car, and my mum would bring caramel wafer biscuits after any appointment, any treatment. That's what we did. And she'd handed me the caramel wafer and just burst into tears. I was like, well, I'm done. I've just got to get through the next 2 weeks, and
that's it,
then I'm done. And there was no marking of it in the hospital. There was no real marking of it day to day. Once I'd completed that final 2 weeks and was in effect done with the dose, I had a picnic in my garden with some friends, and it was all very lovely and great, but I still want to ring a bell.
So I did ring a bell. So like my sister, bless her, she lives around the corner, and she actually has like a bar in her garage, and they have a last orders bell. And so like I sort of messaged all my family being like, I'm like, woo, I'm done, like, and they were like, oh yeah, congratulations. And I was like, I didn't get to ring a fucking bell though, like absolutely livid about this.
Can I come and ring her bell?
Yeah. So Sian was like, yeah, why don't you come to mine? And me and my parents all walked to Sian's, and then Sian came out into the garage, and they like took a video of me and like pictures of me, and I was like ringing this like last orders bell. But you deserve to ring a bell.
Yeah. Should we leave it there? That's quite a good note to leave it on.
Let's leave it there. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, yeah.
Even though this episode's going to be coming out in like February, but you know.
It's next year's problem.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.